Welcome to British Focus. Today, we dive into the Labour government's latest move, an inheritance tax on farms worth over £1 million. British farmers are fighting back, demanding tax relief, and now even Westminster Hall has debated the issue. But when pressed for answers, Labour MPs dodged the questions and shifted the blame. Is this a mistake or a deliberate attack on farmers? Let's break it all down. Stay tuned and watch the clip.
If we take it that the government is trying to address the large tax avoiders, the Dysons and people with billionaires who are investing to avoid this, and you want to protect real farmers, it's perfectly possible for the HMRC to do so. Farmers are not on PAYE, they all make submissions every year on the amount of time and work and effort and money they make from farming. Wouldn't it be possible to give an unlimited exemption to people who are real farmers based on their HMRC submissions?
Thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention. There'll be something I'll be covering on in my speech later on.
I'm very grateful for the honourable member giving away, and listening is really important. And the things that I've heard from my farmers is they're either caught up between, is this a mistake or is this done on purpose? Did the government mistakenly realise it was going to bring all these family farmers into this inheritance tax and agricultural change? Or, worse still, was it planned all along and is a way of getting the land towards housing and some of the net zero targets? Either could be true. Does he have a preference over which one it is? Because I think farmers want to know, was it a mistake and should it be rectified? Or is this an ideal policy driven by the government?
With respect to the Honourable Gentleman, I'm just confused by his argument, because he's talking about the scope, which is the crux of this issue. What is the scope of this tax? Now, he voted in favour of not changing it. He was quoted in the Eastern Daily Press as saying that it would not hit proper farming families. Is that his position, that this tax doesn't hit, quotes, proper farming families, or should the scope of the tax be changed? Because that is the crux of the issue. And with respect to the argument he set out, I don't know what his position is, other than he voted not to change it.
Try and bring his remarks soon to a close. So let others in, please. Thank you.
Just a quick reply to that. At the start of my speech, I said the problem has been this has been turned into a political football and undermining the ability for us to actually, in clear-minded ways, speak about options and opportunities. And it's really sad that the fact that I can see a shadow minister on the opposite side, who I know worked very hard on this, and that I've been able to work with him cross-party, but at the same time, the Shadow Secretary of State does not want to work in a manner that could get the best outcome for our farmers, and that's very sad. Anyway,
Keir Starmer and his Labour government have once again shown their contempt for hard-working British farmers. The recent inheritance tax on farms worth over £1 million is nothing short of an assault on rural Britain. Starmer and his party claim to stand for fairness, but this policy threatens the very survival of family-run farms, pushing them into financial ruin. The worst part? When pressed for answers in Westminster Hall, Labour MPs blatantly dodged the questions, exposing their unwillingness, or perhaps inability, to defend their own disastrous policies. Let's be clear, this is not just about taxation. This is about control. Starmer's Labour is waging a war on British farmers, forcing them to either sell their land or struggle under immense financial pressure. And why? Because this fits neatly into Labour's broader agenda, pushing farmers out, repurposing land for housing, and bending the knee to the net zero agenda, all at the expense of those who feed the nation. If Labour truly cared about farmers, they would introduce exemptions for working farms, yet they refuse to do so. But Starmer's hypocrisy doesn't end there. This is the same man who voted against changing the scope of the tax, while simultaneously telling the public it wouldn't impact proper farming families. So which is it, Keir? Either he's completely incompetent, or he's deliberately misleading the British people. Neither of which are qualities we want in a Prime Minister. Labour wants you to believe that they are fighting against tax avoidance and billionaires exploiting loopholes. But let's be honest, does anyone really believe Starmer would take on the corporate elite, the same elite who fund his party and shape his policies? Instead, Labour is targeting ordinary farmers, many of whom have worked the land for generations, only to be punished for their success. This isn't just bad policy, it's class warfare. Labour pretends to champion the working class, Yet under Starmer, they have become a party of bureaucrats and urban elites, completely detached from the struggles of rural Britain. When confronted with these realities, what did Labour's representatives do? Deflect, evade, and play political games. This government is a disaster in the making. If they can cripple the farming industry, what's next? Will they tax small businesses into oblivion? Strangle the self-employed with more regulation? Starmer's Labour is not the party of the people. It's the party of empty promises, deception, and control. Other news. British farmers continue to protest against Keir Starmer's Labour government after their betrayal on inheritance tax. Before coming to power, Starmer and his MPs promised not to target British farmers, yet now they have stabbed them in the back with crippling taxes. The hypocrisy is undeniable. Amidst this outrage, Conservative MP Geoffrey Cox took a stand in Westminster Hall, exposing Starmer's lies and warning him against shedding crocodile tears. Watch this clip.
The Prime Minister appeared before the National Farmers Union Conference and he shed crocodile tears. He said to the hundreds of farmers assembled and the widely listening electorate from the rural areas that he knew what it meant to lose a family farm. And his voice trembled with that emotional resonance as he conveyed to those constituents in my constituency and across England and all the regions of this great country that he would never impose upon them the tax that he has imposed upon them now. It was a cynical breach of a promise made by a man seeking the highest office in this land.
Hear, hear.
And upon those promises, Sir Edward, thousands of people relied. The elderly widower, whose deceased spouse cannot transfer her allowance. The widows, the elderly farmers, who may now fear that unless they survive 7 years, their family farm, often the work of a century of their ancestors, of herds cultivated and nurtured over decades, will be lost because they must sell off great portions of their farms. And these farms are farmed not necessarily for the profit they make, because the profit is exiguous, but rather for the love of the life they lead and for the support of the fabric of the rural communities we who represent them cherish and adore. And it is that blow, I say to the Minister, aimed with unerring accuracy at the very heart of rural life, that is the reason for the outrage you hear not only upon these benches today, but listen to the horns that are blowing outside. That is the voice of real democracy. That is the voice of the people crying out to those of us here to change direction upon this harmful and damaging decision. And so I say, Sir Edward, I appeal to the Minister, for whom I feel sorry. He has been sent out like a night watchman to face the fast bowling in the twilight of the evening on the Test match's last day, and it is Michael Holding coming in to bowl. I don't envy his task. Go back to his seniors. Tell them to change their direction. The time has come for the ministry and the ministers to accept they are wrong. Their figures are wrong. Change the policy.
Keir Starmer has once again proven himself to be the master of deception, saying one thing to gain power and doing the exact opposite once he has it. British farmers were misled, betrayed, and outright lied to. Before the election, Starmer stood in front of farmers, voice trembling, claiming to understand their struggles, vowing never to impose an inheritance tax that would destroy family farms. Yet here we are, Labour in power, and the very tax they swore against has become a reality. If this isn't blatant hypocrisy, what is? This isn't just about taxes. This is about Labour's systematic attack on rural Britain. Farmers aren't billionaires hiding wealth in offshore accounts. They are the backbone of this nation, working the land, feeding the country, and upholding centuries of tradition. Yet Starmer and his cronies have chosen to punish them, while the true corporate elites, the ones funding Labour's agenda, get off scot-free. If this was about fair taxation, Why is it that farmers, whose land has been passed down for generations, are being forced to sell their heritage to pay off Labour's greed? The outrage is real. Farmers are protesting, the streets are filled with their voices, and yet Labour refuses to listen. Instead of engaging in real debate, what does Starmer do? He sends out weak, uninspired ministers to deflect, evade, and make excuses. They refuse to admit their mistake. They refuse to fix the damage. Instead, they continue their campaign of deception, pretending this tax is necessary while simultaneously trying to paint themselves as champions of the working class. And let's talk about Geoffrey Cox's brutal takedown of Starmer in Westminster Hall. He exposed the Labour leader for what he really is, a cynical, power-hungry politician who will say whatever is necessary to get votes, only to turn his back on the very people who trusted him. Is there any integrity left in this man? He made an emotional plea to farmers, knowing full well he was lying. And now that the backlash is growing, he plays the victim, pretending to be misunderstood while his policies destroy lives. If this is how Starmer governs, what else is he willing to sacrifice for political gain? Farmers today, who's next? Small business owners? The self-employed? Anyone outside the Labour bubble? The writing is on the wall. Starmer's Labour is not for the people. It is a party of deceit, betrayal, and sheer incompetence.